Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a Grand Vizier or a mystic with Sultan's favour. No, tonight you're something far more fragile, a mildly suspicious citizen in 17th century Ottoman Istanbul. You read a few too many old books. You told a neighbour her dream meant something ominous. Maybe you owned a cat. Maybe it blinked wrong. And now you're being accused of sorcery, which, as you'll soon learn, is not a charge. It's a death sentence wrapped in paperwork and fear. So before the scribes start sharpening their quills and the janissaries bang on your door at an ungodly hour, go ahead and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing who's drifting off to these nightmares around the world. And if you want early access to more of these grim lullabies, plus ad-free audio of the episodes, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. But for now, lie back and get comfortable. Let's begin. You feel it before you hear it, that itch at the base of your skull. The weight of too many glances held a second too long. It starts with something minor. The old woman who sells sesame rings by the fountain suddenly stops calling you Yavrum. The man who runs the hammam won't meet your eyes when you pass. Even the stray cats, once happy to circle your ankles, now sit at a distance and blink with unsettling patience. You try to tell yourself it's nothing. That people are fickle, distracted. That the city is always humming with suspicion. But deep down, your gut has already worked it out. The wind has changed, and the city has turned its face slightly away from you. You hear your name whispered one morning, just as the sun spills over the tiled rooftops of your neighbourhood. Not in greeting, not in the friendly, drawn-out way that neighbours say it across a courtyard. No, this is clipped, abrupt. Someone says it like a curse they don't want God to hear. You round the corner to see who it was, but they're already gone. Just two figures in the distance, veils fluttering, sandals clapping hurriedly over stone. They don't look back. You haven't done anything wrong, at least not by your standards. You're not a thief or a traitor. You've never plotted against the Sultan. You don't even cheat at backgammon. Your worst crime, if it can be called that, is being interesting. You can read. You know how to fold paper into birds. You remember dreams and say what they mean, or what they might mean, which is close enough for most people. You've told fortunes, sure, but mostly to make drunk men feel like they had a future worth buying more wine for. You've muttered phrases in languages older than Arabic, but only because you liked how they sounded. And yes, once or twice you may have performed a few harmless tricks in the coffee house, near the Yenikami. Nothing serious, just coins disappearing into dates, or flames that turn to ash in your palm. Child's play, street theatre. People clapped, they laughed, until they didn't. The coffee house is where it begins to rot. It always is. The city runs on coffee and suspicion. You performed there last week, a little dream reading, a joke about the Grand Vizier's moustache, and a charm drawn in oil on parchment that you claimed would protect a man's son from fever. He gave you 2 silver coins for it, smiled, called you a blessing. The next day, the boy coughed up blood. By the day after that, someone had whispered that your charm caused it. Not just failed, caused it. And from there, the whisper became a story. The story became a warning. And the warning became a question passed from lips to ears in the steam of the coffee house. Who let the devil's apprentice walk among us? They call you Shurika Iblis, apprentice of the devil. It sounds almost elegant when said softly, like a line from an old folk poem. But there's no poetry in how it's used. It doesn't mean theatrical illusionist or charismatic street magician. It means dangerous, touched, unclean. It means you speak to forces that honest men fear. And in Ottoman Istanbul, those who speak to the unseen are not admired. They're watched, then questioned, then removed. You notice that the butcher no longer greets you with his usual vulgar jokes. The beggar, with the milky eye, crosses to the other side of the street when you approach. Children, who used to mimic your tricks, now run the other way when they see your shadow. Even your own neighbours, the people who've borrowed your cooking pots, who've listened to you sing during festivals, who've eaten your dried figs, now give you 2 wide smiles or 2 quick farewells. They're distancing themselves, just enough to claim later they had their doubts all along. It's not just social, it's systemic. The city itself begins to rearrange around you. The local imam's Friday sermons grow more pointed, mentions of false prophets and signs of corruption in the ummah. The crier from the madrasa reads out a notice about a new edict concerning unlicensed healers and un-Islamic practices. You catch the tail end of a sentence, and even the whispers of magic shall be punished as treason against the order of God. No names, never names, but everyone looks at you as it's read. You start walking faster through the streets. You stop visiting the market stall where you usually buy rose jam. You wear simpler clothes. You speak less. You turn your face when passing guards. You try to make yourself smaller, less memorable. You tell yourself this will pass, that people will find someone else to gossip about, that the next scandal, a scribe caught with Greek poetry, a merchant caught watering down dye, a baker with mouldy flour, will replace you in the rumour mill. But days go by, and your name still hangs in the air like incense from a cheap censer, cloying, inescapable, and hard to scrub from the walls. You begin to think of leaving. Maybe the ferry to Bursa, maybe a caravan heading east toward Aleppo, maybe something slower and quieter, a friend of a friend in a village near Konya, a place where no one asks questions unless your goats stray onto their roof. But that would mean starting over. Again. You've done it before, you could do it again, but you're tired of running. You've barely made anything of yourself here, and yet it still feels like something worth defending. So you stay, foolishly, proudly, desperately, and that's when the janissaries arrive. But that's not this moment, not yet. For now the city just whispers, it watches, it shifts slightly, like a house settling in the night. And you, who once made children laugh and men dream, are now something to be observed from a safe distance, something slightly off, something that people will later claim they always suspected. Somewhere, in the flickering dark of a back room filled with bitter coffee and stale smoke, someone is saying your name. Not fondly, not fairly, but loudly enough that it won't stay there long. And the city listens. You don't hear the knock. You hear the boots, stone against stone, heavy, deliberate steps in the alley below your window. Not the uneven shuffle of a drunk, not the rush of a messenger. These footsteps carry weight, legal, spiritual, imperial. You sit upright in the dark before you understand why. The air feels wrong, still, somehow heavy. You blink. Try to remember if you left the lamp burning, then realise there is no light. Only flickers of orange dancing against your wall, the way flame bends when filtered through an oil lamp's glass. They're not yours, and they're getting closer. Before the muezzin even opens his mouth for the first call to prayer, they're in your courtyard. Not knocking, not shouting, just present. The front gate creaks open. The hinges scream once like they've never had reason to open at this hour, and aren't sure if they should. You don't know who opened it. A neighbour maybe, or someone with a key who shouldn't have one. But the gate yields all the same, and you hear the crunch of gravel under multiple pairs of boots. You pull your blanket tighter, not for warmth, but out of some childish instinct that maybe fabric can ward off fate. The door to your room doesn't slam open. It doesn't have to. A firm push, a polite groan of wood. Then silence. They don't call your name. They don't ask if you're decent. They already know who you are and what you've done, or what someone says you've done, which amounts to the same thing in this city. One of them steps forward. His armour creaks slightly. The metal glints in the lamplight, but his face does not. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't look at you like you matter at all. He simply says, "You are summoned." That's the entire explanation. Summoned, not arrested, not charged, just requested, as though by invitation. Except they've already helped themselves into your home. They don't wait for your reply. One gestures toward your outer robe. the way a servant might remind you not to forget your shoes. You dress in silence, your hands not quite steady. The knot on your sash won't tie properly. One of them notices. He doesn't help. He just watches until you manage to fumble it into place, then turns toward the door. No shackles, no rope, no physical restraint at all. That would imply guilt. That would be theatrical. And this isn't theatre. This is bureaucracy. And in the Ottoman Empire, nothing is more terrifying than calm, well-dressed men arriving before dawn with polite instructions and no specific timeline. You step into your sandals and follow them out into the courtyard. The lamps sway as they move, casting shadows that stretch long and thin like ghosts trying to escape. The street is too quiet, not because no one's awake. This is Istanbul, and the city never truly sleeps, but because the sound changes when people know they should pretend not to hear. You pass doorways that you know are full of eyes, shutters that almost close too fast. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then goes silent. You start to ask where you're being taken, but the lead janissary raises one gloved finger. Not to shush you, just to remind you, questions are not part of the agreement. You walk. Down streets that feel unfamiliar, in the pre-dawn dark, past shops whose signs you usually greet like old friends. The world is smaller now, stranger. The cobblestones don't seem to line up the way they should. A strange fish smell wafts from the Galata quarter. Though you're nowhere near the docks, the lamps hiss and sputter. You try to track time in your head, to guess where you are based on turns, hills, the slope of the ground. But eventually, the city blurs. You realise that's the point. You're not meant to know where you're going. After a while, the buildings change. Less residential, more official. Fewer balconies with drying laundry and more blank stone walls that stare back at you without expression. The silence here is heavier, institutional. You pass under an arch that you don't recognise. There's no sign, no inscription. Just a narrow doorway guarded by two men who look even less human than the ones who came for you. They don't speak. One simply nods. You're ushered inside. The room smells like wax, mildew and ink. It's the scent of old paper and older decisions. You're led down a corridor where every footstep feels absorbed by the stone. A clerk waits at a desk, barely glancing up from the scroll he's copying. Another man takes your name without emotion. You're not asked for proof. You say it, and it is written down. Just like that, you exist in a new way, as an entry in someone else's ledger. A case number waiting to be filled in. You're placed in a side chamber, too clean to be a cell, too cold to be a waiting room. The walls are lined with niches, some holding folded documents, others strangely empty. A single oil lamp sits in the corner, not scented, not well trimmed. Its flicker makes the room feel lopsided. You sit on a stone bench. No one tells you how long it will be. No one brings food or water. You're not treated cruelly exactly, just as though you've already been forgotten. Time moves differently in rooms like this. The silence presses in around you, thick and slow. You try to piece together who could have named you, what story they told. You think back to old conversations, half jokes made in taverns, trinkets given to curious children. You remember every slip of the tongue, every book you shouldn't have borrowed, every name you let slip in admiration that now sounds like affiliation. You try not to panic, but your body has already decided it's too late for that. Eventually a door creaks open. A man in a deep blue robe enters. He wears no badge, no ornament, just authority. You stand. You're not told to. You just do. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't need to. You recognise the look in his eyes, the one that says he's not here to help, and he doesn't need you to like him. He holds a small parchment in one hand. He doesn't read from it. He just studies your face. Then he says your name. You nod. It's all you can do. Good, he replies and turns to leave. Someone will speak with you shortly. The door closes again. and you're left in the flickering half-dark, breathing the stale air of a room that hasn't forgiven anyone in years. The Imperial divan is not what you imagined. You always pictured something grand, a sweeping hall of marble and silk, dripping with calligraphy, warmed by incense, guarded by solemn-faced men in shining armour. What you get instead is a stone corridor that smells like boiled ink, mildew, and something worse, something you can't identify but suspect has soaked into the grout permanently. The walls sweat, the torches sputter. You're not in a palace, you're in a filing cabinet that occasionally remembers it's part of an empire. Your escorts don't speak as they lead you down yet another hallway. You stop trying to count the turns after the fifth left. Or maybe it was a right. The corridors blend into each other. Everything is the same shade of bureaucratic beige. Doors line the walls, some open, some closed, all looking like they lead to places people go in but don't come out. You pass a room full of bound scrolls stacked like firewood, another full of string-tied files, another where a young man with ink-stained fingers is asleep face down on a stack of parchment, drooling onto a decree about wheat rations. You're not taken to a judge, not to a mosque, not to a dungeon. No one in a turban raises their hands to heaven and denounces you in the name of God. That would be far too theatrical. You're brought instead to a room that feels like someone tried to decorate it with disappointment. A cracked wooden desk sits slightly off-centre. A pile of paper is being slowly devoured by a colony of ants in one corner. There's a single lamp hanging from a rope, swaying slightly with the draft. It creaks like it's narrating your doom. You're told to sit. The man who enters doesn't look like he punishes people. He looks like he corrects their spelling. Narrow shoulders, unimpressive beard, sleeves rolled high to keep from smudging anything. His robe is ink-stained at the wrists, and he smells faintly of vinegar, as if he's been soaking something accusatory in brine. He doesn't announce himself as your interrogator. He just begins. He doesn't accuse, he inquires, politely, formally, chillingly. Have you read any books that are not on the approved list of the ulama? Any Greek texts, Latin, translations of Persian poems that haven't passed review? Have you ever spoken the name of a philosopher not born a Muslim? Do you own anything with symbols on it? Stars, eyes, hands, birds, knots, mirrors, fire. You open your mouth to answer and realise it doesn't matter. None of this is about the answers. It's about the fact that these questions are being asked at all. This is a form, a format, a ceremony in which you play the role of suspicious man, and he plays the role of tired scribe with moral superiority and a side of ink poisoning. He asks if you've spoken to any jinn lately. You stare at him. He clarifies, in dreams, in smoke, in water, or while staring into a mirror for too long. You say, no. He writes something down. You realise it doesn't matter that you said no. He asks if your cat ever stares at you without blinking. You pause for a second too long. He notes that too. This isn't about evidence. This is about vibe. And your vibe, apparently, is off. He asks about the talisman. What talisman? The one reportedly found in your possession. You ask what it looks like. He doesn't know. He's just reading the report. Someone else found it. Or said they found it. Somewhere near you. That's enough. The scribe taps his pen on the paper in front of him and waits. You realise there is no good answer. Denying it sounds defensive. Admitting it sounds worse. Explaining that people bring you strange things for interpretation sounds like you're bragging. So you say nothing. He writes that down too. More questions. Have you ever attempted healing? Not basic poultices or prayers, but anything involving drawings, stones, or specific chants? Do you know what the number 7 means? Have you ever spoken a verse backward? Do you believe dreams can predict death? Have you ever guessed someone would die, and then they did? You want to laugh. You really do. Because all of these things could describe half the city. And if not half, then at least every dervish, midwife, barber, and overly curious spice seller within 3 districts. But you don't laugh. You keep your face still and your voice quiet. You answer with care, not because you think it will help, but because you need to believe it might, for a little while longer. The scribe looks up at you as though seeing you for the first time. His eyes are dull but not unkind, just tired. He sighs and reaches for another paper, pulls it from the stack like it's a menu item. He asks if you've been in contact with any foreigners. You say no. He asks again, this time specifically. Armenians, Venetians, Frenchmen, travellers with satchels full of charts. You say you sold a lemon to a man with an accent once. He hums and writes that down. Then he moves on. Eventually, he stops asking questions. He just stares at the paper in front of him, like it's done something personal to him. He rubs his eyes and sets his pen down. Then, with the same tone a butcher might use when choosing which lamb to take first, he says, "You may wait in the side room." The side room is exactly like the first one, only smaller. The walls are closer, and the window, if it is a window, has been shuttered from the outside. You sit on another splintered bench. Time stretches out again. You wonder how many others have sat on this same bench before you. How many of them were also harmless, interesting, unlucky? How many of them also thought, surely they'll realise I'm no threat? How many of them were never seen again? You don't know what they'll do next. Maybe they'll question you again. Maybe someone more official will arrive. Maybe they'll forget you in this room for another hour, or a day, or until the janitor finds your bones. You sit there, trying not to think too loudly, as the building creaks around you, like it's been groaning under the weight of too many unsorted names. You realise something even worse than being accused. They haven't decided what you are yet, and that means you can still become anything. Someone eventually returns for you. You don't know how much time has passed. The lamp has burned lower. Your back aches from the bench and your legs are pins and needles. A different official this time, not a scribe, not a janissary. He wears finer robes, though still unadorned. A belt heavy with keys and seal rings clinks as he walks. He nods once and gestures you to follow. No words. The quiet is almost a form of politeness, if you ignore the weight of it. You're taken to a different room, one clearly used for meetings. Though meeting might be too generous a word for what's about to happen. There's a rug, a table, and 3 stools, 2 already occupied. One by the ink-stained scribe from before, the other by a man you haven't seen yet. Older, clean-shaven, pale robes pressed and spotless. His eyes are bloodshot but sharp. He studies you the way an apothecary might study a fly in a bottle, with curiosity but no affection. You sit when you're told. The stool creaks. The scribe clears his throat. The clean-robed man speaks first, in a voice flat enough to be carved into stone. You are aware, he says, that you have been accused of practicing sihr. You nod. Then, out of a misplaced instinct for fairness, you ask the question that seals your fate. What kind of sorcery? The scribe chuckles without humour. The older man doesn't move. Sihr, he repeats, is the manipulation of unseen forces. It includes the summoning of jinn, invocation of curses, preparation of talismans, utterance of forbidden names, use of predictive arts, dream channeling, invocation of non-Islamic spirits, unnatural influence over health, wealth, or fate, and several others. He pauses. Also, astrology, herb lore, mirror gazing, and recitation of excessively obscure proverbs. You blink. That covers a lot of ground. And sleep paralysis, the scribe adds, almost cheerfully. The kind where your eyes are open and you see shadows at the edge of your vision. That too. You start to respond, to point out that sleep paralysis is a thing that happens to you, not something you do. But something about the way they're watching you stops you. It's like being handed a list of crimes and realising your entire personality is now considered contraband. They present the item next. A cloth bundle is unwrapped, and out slides a worn bit of parchment, covered in oily smudges and strange symbols. It's tied with a piece of faded twine, and one corner is burned. A crude drawing, possibly a bird, possibly an eye, possibly a very confused camel, is etched into the corner. This, the scribe says, was found under your sleeping mat. You stare at it. You've never seen it before in your life. That's not mine. They ignore this. It was tucked beside a small pouch of fennel seed and a nail, the scribe adds, as if this information settles the matter. You shake your head. I don't use talismans. I study language. I interpret dreams. Dream interpretation is itself a form of knowledge linked to the unseen. The elder man interrupts. The prophet, peace be upon him, warned of those who claim to interpret beyond the limits of revelation. You nod, carefully. Yes, but he also said that dreams are 1/46th of prophecy, and that a good dream is from Allah. Quoting hadith, the scribe mutters, scribbling. Interesting. You blink. It's a common hadith. Very interesting, he repeats, louder. The elder leans forward. And where did you learn to recite scripture with such confidence? You falter. From study, from the mosque, from my father. Your father was a baker. You stare. Yes, and he also taught at the madrasa before he lost his eyesight. They write that down. It doesn't feel like they believe you, or maybe they do. It just doesn't matter. You try again. I've never summoned anything. I've never cursed anyone. I've never even drawn a proper talisman. And if someone planted one in my room, then... You knew it was a talisman before we named it, the scribe says. You freeze. He smiles faintly. You called it that yourself. Interesting. You feel the urge to claw your way out of your own skin. The elder stands and begins pacing slowly, not angry, not threatening, just moving like someone reviewing inventory. You are the inventory. There are signs, he says almost to himself. Certain patterns. Men who are clever but not humble, curious but not obedient, drawn to books not on approved lists, friends with coffeehouse philosophers, owners of black cats. My cat is orange, you say, because that's the only part you can argue with. They ignore you. He picks up the parchment again and holds it between two fingers, like it might be contagious. This symbol here, he says, we've seen it before, used by a man in Bursa who claimed he could cure infertility by chanting over pomegranate juice. The same man was later found speaking to shadows in his sleep. You start to say something, anything, but he raises one hand. You don't need to defend yourself. The record will speak. You feel your voice slipping down your throat. You want to argue, but everything you say becomes fuel. Scripture makes you look too confident. Logic makes you look too Western. Silence makes you look guilty. Emotion makes you look unstable. There is no correct posture here, no clean exit. Eventually, they tire of you. You'll remain in holding, the elder says, as if deciding where to store a piece of pottery. Further inquiry is required. We'll see if others come forward. The guards return. One of them wraps the talisman again, though less carefully this time, as if it's already served its purpose. You're led back down the corridor, your steps slower now. You don't ask where you're going. You don't ask what comes next. Because now you understand it, you're not accused of sorcery because of what you did. You're accused because of what you are. The holding chamber isn't a cell. Not exactly. There are no bars, no shackles, no obvious instruments of persuasion. But you're not free to leave, and the men standing by the door are not there for decoration. The room is long and narrow, lined with thin mats that have seen better centuries. The air is stale, not foul, but tired, like it's been breathed too many times by people who weren't sure how long they were supposed to stay. You're guided to a corner without instruction. No one speaks to you directly. You take your place among the others and try not to look like you're listening. You're not alone. That fact is both comforting and terrifying. There are perhaps 8 of you here, maybe 10. The count keeps shifting as men come and go, called out one at a time, like raffle prizes no one wants to win. You scan the faces. None seem overtly dangerous. No bandits or murderers. Just people. People with thoughtful eyes, slumped shoulders, ink on their sleeves, or dried herbs in their satchels. You spot a man with a calligrapher's ink-stained thumb. Another with a chipped card balanced on his knee. Someone coughs and someone else whispers a quiet prayer that doesn't sound entirely Arabic. You speak in low tones when the guards aren't close. It starts slow. A nod, a shared glance, a question asked with a raised eyebrow and answered with a subtle shrug. Eventually, the stories come out. Not all at once, but in pieces. One man, soft-spoken and smelling faintly of rosewater, was a poet. Wrote satirical verse for coffeehouse recitations. Apparently, someone high-ranking didn't appreciate being compared to a goat in heat, even in metaphor. Another, broad-shouldered and red-eyed, is a dervish who spun counterclockwise during a public ceremony. He says it was the wind's fault. Someone in the crowd called it blasphemy. That was all it took. The youngest among you is a bookseller, 20, maybe 22. He speaks in clipped, nervous phrases and fiddles constantly with the hem of his sleeve. He says his shop stocked French pamphlets, translated into Ottoman Turkish, mostly harmless essays on human reason and universal balance. He sold one to a student who turned out to be an informant. Now he's here, his hands trembling every time someone new is brought in. You realise something very quickly. No one in this room did anything particularly criminal. What they did was noticeable, memorable, a little too clever, a little too odd, a little too willing to step sideways when everyone else was walking straight. And someone somewhere up the ladder decided that made them dangerous. It was just a performance, the poet mutters at one point, more to himself than to anyone else. Everyone nods. That's how all the stories begin. A performance, a ritual, a joke, a charm, a dance, a reading, a bit of coloured smoke during a wedding ceremony, a clever line recited at the wrong moment. Everyone thought it was harmless. The audience laughed. The patrons clapped. Someone asked for a copy or a repeat performance or the name of your master. It was fun, until it wasn't. Eventually, someone important got nervous. Sometimes it's a judge who doesn't like satire. Sometimes a mullah who's grown suspicious of improvised theology. Sometimes it's a minor official with a cousin who thinks his dreams have meanings you shouldn't be interpreting. Or a neighbour who overheard a chant you didn't mean to say so loudly. Or a wife who saw you draw a symbol while mending a shoe. It doesn't matter how pure your intentions were. What matters is what they felt, and whether that feeling made the right person uneasy. One man, sitting in the far corner with a half-missing ear, tells you about a performer in a dirna who was arrested after a shadow puppet play. One of the puppets wore a tiny turban that looked a little too much like the Grand Vizier's. That was enough. The puppeteer claimed coincidence. They hung him anyway. The man finishes his story by biting into a fig he's been hoarding and says, "Everyone laughs, but no one forgets who made them uncomfortable." You learn a few tricks from these men, not magical ones, just practical. How to answer questions without answering them. How to stay alert without making eye contact. Which guards to avoid and which ones might let a loaf of bread pass through the bars if you phrase your request right. You learn that there's a rhythm to this place, not time exactly, but rotation. People are called in and either come back quieter or don't come back at all. No one explains what happens to those who don't return. You don't ask. The bookseller tries to read from memory. He recites fragments of Rumi, Hafiz, and a few banned philosophers, whose names he doesn't say out loud. He says it helps keep his mind intact. The poet mutters responses under his breath, correcting meter or rhythm. The dervish occasionally closes his eyes and spins his fingers slowly in the air. Never his whole body, not in here, but enough to keep the motion alive in his bones. You find yourself listening, not because it's hopeful exactly, but because it's human. Someone else, a man whose name no one knows but who smells like ink and dried mint, tells a story one night, just before sleep, about a philosopher who once said that fear is the mind's way of begging the body not to die stupidly. Everyone agrees this sounds right. You try to sleep. Though the mats are thin and the light never fully fades, there is always someone awake, pacing, praying, or sitting perfectly still, as if waiting for an invisible verdict. Dreams come in flashes, hands on your shoulder, whispers behind curtains. The sensation of falling into a pit only to land back in your own skin. You wake up sweating, unsure if you made a sound. Morning and evening blur. You're given food sometimes, water, always tepid, a rag to wash with. The scribe visits once more to ask a follow-up question. He doesn't look at you when he asks it, just writes down your answer and leaves. A few men are taken out for questioning. The dervish returns with bruised wrists. He doesn't speak for 2 days. No one presses. You realise this is the part before anything really happens. This is purgatory, the waiting room of the accused. Here, everyone is guilty. Eventually. All that matters is which version of your story gets recorded and who signs it. You sit in the corner of the room, listening to someone softly hum a forgotten melody. And you wait. They come for you again, after what feels like a week, but might only be a day. Time inside this place stretches and warps, until even your dreams forget what order they are supposed to follow. One moment, you're chewing a crust of bread someone left too long in a corner. The next, the door opens. A shadow steps in and everything stills. The man who greets you is different from the others. Not a guard, not a scribe, not an executioner in waiting. He wears no uniform, but everything about him feels precise. His robe is dark, well-fitted, finely hemmed but unadorned. No jewellery, no weapons. His face is smooth, his beard neat. His eyes hold a calmness that's almost soothing, until you realise it's the calm of a man who already knows the outcome of this conversation. He doesn't bark orders or glare at you. He smiles. That smile is the most unsettling thing you've seen in weeks. He introduces himself casually. You don't remember the name. You're not supposed to. It's forgettable on purpose. But he says he's with the Mutaferrika, and that sticks. The Sultan's personal intelligence service. Not spies exactly. More like watchers. Archivists of unease. They specialise in patterns, not of stars like astrologers, but of people. Connections, coincidences, whispers that echo from one coffeehouse to the next and start to sound like music. He waves for you to sit. There is tea already poured on the table. Not prison tea, real tea, fragrant and slightly floral, served in a clean glass with no visible chips. You don't touch it. He doesn't mind. He sips from his own cup and asks how you're sleeping. You don't answer. He nods thoughtfully, like you've said something deep. Most people have trouble at first, he says, but the dreams usually stop once they realise we're not interested in what they did. We're interested in what they know. You try to keep your face still, but something in your spine tightens. He glances at a small folder on the table. Nothing dramatic. No thick files, no black-smeared ledgers. Just a few folded papers bound with twine. He flips one open and scans it like he's reviewing the breakfast menu. I'm curious, he begins, about the Persian manuscript found in your home last year, the one on planetary influence. You blink. It was a gift. I didn't read most of it. The script was marginally legible, he interrupts, but the marginalia were in Greek. Notes in someone else's hand, small, tight, academic, but personal. You didn't write those? You shake your head. I don't write Greek. He smiles again. No, but you keep company with someone who does. You say nothing. He continues anyway. The handwriting matches a few pamphlets we've seen circulating near the docks. Not widely, not dangerously, just suggestive, philosophical, curious. Do you know the term harmonic cosmology? You don't, and he can tell. He taps the rim of his tea glass. No matter. What I want to know is simple. Who gave you the book? Who shared the Greek commentary? And who attends the evening discussions at the second-floor room behind the baker's stall in Üsküdar? You try not to react, but it hits you anyway. That's not where you live. That's where a friend of a friend holds informal readings. Old texts, Sufi poems, translations of Syrian scholars who lived too long ago to be politically dangerous. You've only been once, maybe twice. You didn't think it mattered. It matters. He doesn't accuse you of anything directly. He doesn't need to. His questions move in soft circles, always returning to the same quiet themes. Who do you speak to? Where do you spend time? Whose words do you repeat? Who's clever enough to stay quiet but not clever enough to stay invisible? You insist you're not part of anything. You're a dream interpreter, a street performer, a reader of riddles. You dabble in the odd book, yes, but mostly for amusement. You don't believe in conspiracies. You barely believe in yourself most mornings. He laughs, not mockingly, just pleasantly, as if your resistance is quaint. I'm not here to punish you, he says. I'm here to make sense of the picture. You ask what picture? He gestures to the papers. You, the dervish, the bookseller, the astrologer who fled to Bursa, the widow who claims she speaks to angels while boiling rosewater, the man in Galata who says he can smell when someone is lying. You see, none of you are dangerous alone. But cities are not toppled by blades. They're toppled by ideas moving through the wrong mouths. You tell him you've never toppled anything in your life. That's exactly why we're having this conversation now, he replies, leaning in slightly, because you think that means you're safe. He lets the silence hang. You feel it settle around your shoulders like a damp cloak. Then softly, he asks one last question. Have you ever spoken the name of the hidden imam during a performance? You freeze, not because you haven't, but because the question itself is a trap. If you say yes, you're implicating yourself in Shia heresy. If you say no too quickly, it sounds rehearsed. If you say you don't know what that means, they'll call you evasive or stupid, and neither one helps you. You say nothing. He nods, satisfied. He stands, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeves. That's all for now, he says, but we'll speak again, perhaps with more clarity. He leaves without looking back. The guards return and lead you away, not roughly, not cruelly, just like a package that needs to be stored. As you're walked back through the same tired corridors, you realise something cold and final. They don't think you're a sorcerer. They think you're a messenger, and whether or not you meant to carry anything, the weight is now yours. They summon you again the next morning, or what you think is morning. The light in this place is slippery, filtered through high windows and soot-smudged lantern glass. Time has known sharp corners. Everything is soft and slow and faintly spoiled, like milk that hasn't turned yet, but soon will. The guards say nothing, as usual. You follow. You're brought not to the familiar inquiry room, but to a different space entirely, a chamber that tries weakly to look official. Someone's made an effort. There's a rug, relatively clean. A small brazier flickers in the corner, struggling to cut the chill. A pitcher of water on the table has not been touched. You recognise the staging immediately. This is not where decisions are made. This is where performances are given. There are 3 people in the room already. 2 of them wear official robes. Different branches, maybe judiciary and religious, or perhaps just different departments of the same machine. The 3rd is a woman, modestly dressed, older than you, but not old. Her scarf is wrapped too tightly, like she dressed herself while shaking. She doesn't look at you when you enter, but you recognise her. You've seen her before, once in a coffee house near the Fatih district. She came to you asking for help understanding a dream, paid in copper, thanked you profusely, said it was just for her peace of mind. She's here to destroy you. The official at the centre clears his throat and opens a ledger. The tone is conversational, even warm. Do you recall offering services to this woman? A consultation about a dream she experienced? You nod. Of course you do. You remember the conversation. She had dreamed of a fish with a human face, floating in a basin of milk, a black ribbon tied around its tail. It had spoken, not in words, but in a feeling, a heavy dread. She said she awoke crying and couldn't explain why. You told her the symbolism suggested familial illness, possibly a warning of some misfortune. The fish, you explained, was often associated with fate in Ottoman dream symbology. Milk meant vulnerability. A black ribbon could imply mourning. You said it gently. She had nodded slowly, thanked you, said she would pray for protection. You remember none of it sounding like a curse. Now she speaks. Her voice is low, pinched at the edges. A few days after that, my uncle fell ill. He died by the week's end. He was healthy before. There was no warning. The way she says it, it's not a complaint. It's a confession of fear. You open your mouth not to deny it, you don't need to, but to explain. Dreams don't cause death. Interpretations don't bend the fabric of reality. The art of dream reading, such as it is, draws on collective meanings, inherited signs. You're not invoking anything. You're reflecting. But before you can say any of that, the second official interjects. And how, he asks, did you determine that her uncle was in danger? You blink. I didn't. I told her the dream suggested misfortune. Illness, perhaps. Not specific. But he did fall ill. Yes, you say, but... And you linked this to planetary movements? You hesitate. You did mention the stars briefly. A passing comment about the moon being in its waning phase, which, according to certain traditions, heightens emotional vulnerability. It wasn't even part of the main reading, more of an aside to comfort her. You never tracked charts. You barely remember your astronomy lessons. But they have the quote recorded. Somewhere, someone remembered it. I mentioned it only in passing, you say. It's a common belief. The first official nods, slow and grave. Common, he repeats, but not approved. They produce a paper, a transcription. Your words reconstructed from memory or testimony. You don't know who wrote it down. You suspect it doesn't matter. It reads, the stars are in a declining mood. The signs are unfavourable for older men. You try to object. You try to explain tone. But interpretation doesn't exist in this room. Not the literary kind anyway. Only intent. And your intent, as far as they're concerned, has already been decided. You glance again at the woman. She still won't meet your gaze. She looks like someone who came here for help and is ashamed of what she's become. But fear has a way of making saints out of snitches. You don't blame her. Not entirely. Somewhere along the line, she stopped wondering if you were right and started fearing you made it happen. She was frightened, you say quietly. She wanted comfort. I gave her symbols to hold on to, that's all. And now her uncle is dead, the second man replies, and she believes you had knowledge of this, perhaps more than knowledge. He doesn't need to say the word. You hear it anyway. Sorcery. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Just the quiet suggestion of an unseen link between what was said and what occurred. That's all a charge of witchcraft ever is, suspicion plus bad timing. You say, it was a dream about fish. No one responds. You add, I wish I'd told her it was about taxes. The first official frowns, confused. The second scowls. The woman doesn't move. You realise the joke landed nowhere. They dismiss her after that. No ceremony, no thank you. Just a guard gesturing toward the hallway, and she leaves quickly, head down. You wonder if she'll sleep any better now that she's been heard. Probably not. Guilt doesn't cancel fear. It just shares the bed. The officials spend a few more minutes asking perfunctory follow-ups. Have you interpreted other dreams recently? Have any of those dreams come true? Have you made predictions tied to political events, deaths, disasters, or harvests? You deny each question as plainly as you can. You say you don't claim to predict. You only read symbols. Their expressions don't change. You get the feeling they've heard all this before. When it's over, they say you may return to your room. Not a cell, not yet. Just the place where the walls are close and the silence is thick. You walk back slowly, escorted by a guard who looks like he'd rather be somewhere else. As you reach your door, you realise something bleak. You could have said anything. You could have told her it was indigestion, or unfinished business, or emotional regret. You could have said the fish represented her own fear of drowning in domestic expectation, but you didn't. You said what you believed was most useful, most soothing, most likely to help. And now, because a man died, your words are being counted like weapons. There is no trial in the way you imagined, no courtroom, no gavel, no clear moment when one man points and says, "That one, that's the sorcerer." There is only process, endless, shifting, self-devouring process. Your trial begins not with a bell or a summons, but with a shuffled walk down another dim corridor, past shelves sagging with scrolls, and walls that sweat ink and candle grease. You're not escorted into a hall of justice. You're filed into an overgrown office. There are desks, stacks of paper, muttering men hunched over ledgers, and a smell of stale bread and damp wool. You're told to wait. Again. You sit. Again. A clerk passes and gestures vaguely toward a corner where you're supposed to stand when your name is called, or when someone says something that sounds like your name. At this point, you've learned not to expect clarity. Names here are loose things. You're not a person, really. You're a case number in someone else's ledger, written in smudged script next to the phrase, "potential irregularity." Eventually, a man in a brown robe squints at a page and says something close enough to your name that the clerk nudges you forward. You stand. You're not led into a chamber. You're brought to a table. Behind it sits a man with the weary dignity of someone who once believed in justice and has since learned to live without it. He is the card, or at least a functionary representing him. His turban is slightly askew. His ink-stained hands tremble from age or caffeine, and his expression is one of vague disappointment, like he's judging you for being here, before he even knows why. He doesn't ask what you did. He asks what they're saying you did. You pause before answering, unsure of the correct version to offer. Should you mention the dream? The talisman? The tea with the mutaferica? You begin to speak, and he waves you off, already writing something on a slip of parchment with a shaking hand. There are no formal accusations presented to you. Instead, he reads a list of concerns, which is a word that sounds less violent than charges, but functions the same. The concerns are as follows: undue influence through unofficial spiritual practices, possession of questionable materials, consultation with common citizens on matters of fate and death, irregular religious statements, and this one he mumbles, potential blasphemous misuse of astrological references. You want to ask what part of that is illegal. You don't. You already know the answer. Everything is legal until someone says it isn't. He gestures for you to recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. You do so, clearly and without hesitation. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. You say it as you've always said it. The words are familiar, sacred, true. The judge stares at you for a moment. Then he sighs. They say sorcerers can lie, he mutters, almost apologetically. You're tempted to ask who they are and why they get to define the terms of this theatre, but you don't. You stay quiet. It feels safer. He interprets your silence as resistance. He writes that down. More scrolls are produced, testimonies, signed complaints, reports from neighbourhood watchers. One of them claims you are heard muttering strange words near a fig tree. Another insists you knew a man would die before he died. One says you own too many books for someone without a formal madrasa license. The last says your eyes change colour slightly in candlelight. You're not sure whether to laugh or cry. You do neither. The Carder folds his hands. You've been given the chance to confess, he says, not because we seek vengeance, but because repentance can preserve your soul. You don't know what you're expected to confess, that you read too much, that you speak too carefully, that your cat gives people the creeps. You say nothing. That, he says, is a shame. He tells you a confession would not necessarily mean punishment, that many who admit fault are simply advised, released, watched from a distance, that those who insist on their innocence tend to complicate things. You understand what he's saying? Confess and walk, or resist and rot. You say you have nothing to confess. He writes something on a fresh piece of parchment with firm strokes this time. Another official enters, younger, crisper, with the expression of someone still excited to be part of the system. He reviews the page, then turns to you and recites your status. You are not sentenced, not condemned, but you are to be held indefinitely for the safety of the city. The language is cautious, nothing permanent, nothing too severe, just enough to disappear someone politely. There is no outrage in the room, no righteous fury, no dramatic speech or theological debate. You weren't given a chance to prove your piety, because this isn't about belief. It's about possibility. The possibility that you might unsettle the wrong person, inspire the wrong thought, survive too long in the minds of too many curious strangers. It's about potential. They don't fear what you've done. They fear what you could do. The process ends not with a gavel, but with a quiet nod. A guard comes to collect you, one of the regulars. You recognize him. He doesn't look at you. You follow him back through the same corridor, past the same shelves, past the same tired faces, hunched over the same papers. You're returned to your room. Not the same one, a smaller one. Bare mat, no window. The door closes. You sit in the half-dark and try to recall how this started. A dream, a conversation, a coin in exchange for comfort. Somewhere along the line, that became sedition. You lie back. The ceiling is uneven. There's a crack in one corner that looks like a star, or maybe an eye. You don't say the Shahada again. You don't speak at all, because now you understand what they're really after. They don't want you to confess. They want you to doubt. They said they wouldn't torture you. They lied. Not because they still need proof. They don't. You're already guilty, but they need your signature. Something neat for the records. A confession to file away in case the winds shift and someone somewhere demands to see the logic behind your punishment. And so, here you are. They don't call it torture. That's part of the performance. What happens to you is known by another name. Divine clarification. A blessed correction. A process by which the truth, which already exists in their eyes, is gently persuaded to rise from your flesh like steam from a hot stone. It's not about pain, they say. It's about purification. You're taken from your room late at night, when your body is too tired to protest and your mind too fogged to think clearly. The hallway feels colder than usual. The guards say nothing. One of them hands you a cloth to tie around your eyes as though offering a kindness. You don't ask why. You already know. They bring you to a room beneath the others. You can feel the shift, the way the air turns thick with mould and stone dust. There are no windows. The door shuts behind you with a finality that removes any illusions you might still be clinging to. This room is not for questions. It's for answers, whether you're ready to give them or not. The man who waits inside is not a judge or a clerk or a priest. He is not introduced. He wears no badge of office. His hands are bare and broad and covered in tiny scars, not from violence, but from repetition. He is flanked by two assistants who move silently. Like this is just another routine task to be completed before dawn. Your hands are tied behind your back with cord, not rope. Cord bites deeper. You're told to kneel, but your legs don't obey. Someone helps you down. The stone floor presses cold against your shins. Your heartbeat feels too loud in your ears. No one asks you if you're ready. They begin with the feet. Long, thin rods, polished smooth but unyielding, are brought out and tested against the palm of one assistant's hand. Not for measurement, just for tradition. Then they are brought down on the soles of your feet in precise measured strokes. Not wild, not angry, just consistent, again and again. Each impact sends a message up your spine, past your ribs, through your teeth. The pain is not sharp, not at first, it's dull, hammering, cumulative. Your body reacts before your mind can name it. After the first 10 blows, you grit your teeth. After 20, you begin to shake. Somewhere around 30, you forget how to count. Your vision pulses with each strike. You focus on the scent of the room. Old iron, sweat, cloves. There are cloves in your mouth, stuffed under your tongue. For the blood, for the smell, for the symbolism. No one explains why. They don't need to. You don't scream. That surprises you. You groan, you shudder, you make noises you can't control. But you don't scream. Not because you're strong, not because you're brave, but because part of you still believes that if you stay quiet, you'll get to keep something. Your dignity, maybe, or your soul, or at least the illusion of having had a choice. When you pass out the first time, it's not dramatic. Your body simply folds. You wake up to someone tapping your cheek gently. The pain floods back before your eyes fully open. The taste of iron has overwhelmed the cloves now. They ask if you're ready to confess. You shake your head, or maybe you don't. You're not sure your neck moves the way it used to, but they take your silence as an invitation to continue. This time, it's the thighs, a different rod, a heavier hand. The pain is deeper now, slower to bloom but longer to fade. Your body sags against the cords, which now burn your wrists. You feel something warm trickling down your leg and hope it's sweat. They don't call you names. They don't insult your beliefs. This isn't personal. That's what makes it worse. They treat you like a vessel that needs to be emptied, not a person who deserves persuasion. There's no malice here, just method. And method, when applied without mercy, is indistinguishable from cruelty. You pass out again. This time, there's no wake-up slap. You return slowly, like a ghost reluctant to re-inhabit its own body. You open your eyes and see a shape in front of you, seated, not standing. A man in clean robes, a table before him. He slides something across the table toward you. It is a document, your confession, already written. He speaks softly, almost kindly. He says you've suffered enough. There's no need for more. All they need now is your agreement. Just sign, or mark, or nod. It doesn't have to be perfect, just enough to confirm what they already know. Your fingers don't work properly. Someone places a quill between them anyway. Your hand shakes, jerking like a leaf caught in a stream. You smear more than you write, but it's enough. The man smiles and rolls the paper shut. You are unbound, not freed, unbound. The cord is cut and your hands fall limp to your sides. You try to move, but nothing listens. You're lifted, carried really, back to your room. This time, the mat feels like silk. You lie there, body pulsing with pain, vision blurred, mouth dry. You think about the words in that confession, about how many of them were true, about how many were close enough. You think about what you lost in the process, not just blood or skin or pride, but the small quiet thing inside you that used to whisper, I know who I am. You lie still. Not because you've given up, but because you no longer know what you would be giving up for. They wake you before dawn, not with shouts or kicks, but with a quiet tap on the shoulder. That alone is enough to set off alarms in your battered mind. Pain still echoes through your limbs, like an old song you can't forget. You've only just begun to feel the edges of your body again, and now someone is telling you, gently, to stand. You are dressed, not in your own clothes. The garments they provide are thin and scratchy, a dull brown robe, several sizes too large, cinched with a fraying sash. It smells faintly of mildew and something sweet, incense maybe, or old fruit. You're not sure which is worser. Around your neck, they place a talisman. Not the one from the trial, not the one you never made, but something clearly fake. cartoonish even. A charm strung on a leather cord, inscribed with symbols too large and crude to be serious. It looks like a child's imitation of evil. It's meant to mock you and to frighten others. Then there's the hat. It's conical. Of course it is. Tall and ridiculous, patched together with scraps of felt and linen dyed in mismatched colours. It bobs slightly when you walk, like a jester's cap without bells. There are words stitched into it, not ones you can see, but you hear the guards laugh as they adjust it on your head. One of them mutters the word munetchim, astrologer. Another calls it a jinn catcher. You try not to react. Ash is smeared on your cheeks in broad, uneven stripes. Ritualistic, theatrical, humbling. You're not sure whether it's symbolic of guilt or purification. Either way, it stings when it touches the raw skin near your jawline. You're led through the back corridors of the complex, out a gate you've never seen before. The sky is still a dull grey, the light not fully broken. The air smells of wet stone and roasted barley. Istanbul is waking up, and you are part of the morning. You don't know how many people are watching. At first, it's just a few shopkeepers, some children loitering near the fountain, a tired bread vendor setting up her stall. They notice you immediately. That's the point. You are the first headline of the day. Eyes widen, mouths freeze mid-word. Someone nudges someone else. The ripple spreads. You're marched in silence through the market square. 2 guards on either side. You're not bound, but you might as well be. Your feet drag slightly. Each step sends a fresh pulse of pain up your legs. You try to walk upright, but your body refuses to forget what it's been through. People don't cheer. They don't scream. This isn't a public execution, just a public warning. You're not here to die. You're here to be seen. Children follow first, they point. Some laugh. One throws a handful of pomegranate seeds at you. A symbolic gesture, somewhere between a curse and a cleansing. More follow suit. The seeds bounce off your chest and scatter at your feet. A few burst on the ground like tiny red blisters. An old man spits in your direction. It doesn't reach you, but the intent lands. A woman crosses herself in the Christian fashion and turns away. A teenage boy stares at you too long before someone yanks his sleeve. You pass familiar stalls, the olive seller, the man who once bought a charm for his mother's arthritis, the widow who asked you to bless her cat. None of them speak, none of them intervene. You can see it on their faces, that careful neutrality, not cruelty, not concern, just survival. The guards stop in front of the mosque courtyard. It's busier now. The crowd has grown. The imam stands near the steps, arms folded, eyes hard. He doesn't address you. He addresses the onlookers. He speaks of corruption, of false prophets, of those who twist knowledge into arrogance. He warns against signs and symbols, against the seduction of mysteries. He says a good Muslim turns only to God, not to cards or stars or charms drawn in secret ink. His voice carries easily. It's a good speech, well practiced, measured, not accusing you by name, but making you the living punctuation mark at the end of each sentence. You don't hear all of it. Somewhere in the middle, your attention drifts. The pain in your feet has returned in waves. The blood beneath your skin pulses out of rhythm. You taste the cloves again, faint but bitter. A woman nearby sobs quietly. You don't know why. You don't know if it's for you or something else entirely. The boundaries blur. Eventually, the sermon ends. The crowd disperses slowly, reluctantly. Some linger just to see what happens next. What happens next is nothing. You are marched on, back through the same streets, though not as directly. It's important that people in other neighbourhoods see you too. You're not a local lesson. You're a citywide one. A warning that walks. Someone hurls a date pit at you. It misses. You don't flinch. A boy tries to tug your robe, but a guard bats his hand away. A woman says a prayer aloud and pulls her veil down tighter. And then, just like that, the route is done. You're returned to the holding building through a side gate. Your robe is removed, the talisman is untied, the hat is taken from your head, and one of the guards chuckles as he folds it, like it's a costume to be reused later. The ash stays on your face. No one offers you water. Back in your room, you lie down and stare at the wall. You're too tired to feel anything. Not anger, not shame, not grief. Just the dull weight of having been used, turned into a lesson for others. A walking parable with bad posture and worse shoes. You are not dead. That's supposed to mean something. You're just not sure what anymore. They don't tell you you've been pardoned. There's no ceremony, no scroll with a ribbon, no official reading of your name, followed by declarations of mercy from on high. There's just a knock, not even a hard one, and then the door creaks open. A man you've never seen before, wearing robes too clean for this building, steps in and says, "You're being released." You wait for more, but that's it. Not acquitted, not exonerated, just released. The word hangs in the air, hollow and temporary. You wonder if this is a trick, another kind of test, to see if you'll rejoice too quickly, or beg, or collapse. But the man has already stepped aside, waving vaguely at the corridor behind him, as if to say, "Get out," while you still can. You walk without ceremony through the compound's side gate. No chains, no escort. The guards at the door don't even look at you. One of them yawns. You're not a threat. You're not interesting. You're just another file being closed. Someone, somewhere, made a decision. Not because you are innocent. Innocence isn't relevant here. But because you're not worth the trouble anymore. Your usefulness as a warning has expired. The streets look different now. Wider somehow. Sharper. The sound of the city hits you like an unexpected gust of wind. Voices, wheels, footsteps, the shriek of gulls. You haven't heard this much life in weeks. You flinch at the noise. Your legs, still recovering from the rods, ache with every step. The world continues on without you. The city, of course, never stopped. You make your way back home slowly. The road is familiar, but people look at you differently now, or refuse to look at all. A boy nudges his friend and points. A vendor who once gave you extra dates turns her back as you pass. The old man on your street, the one who used to nod every morning without fail, suddenly finds something fascinating in the dirt. You smile reflexively at someone and watch them recoil just slightly. You're not a criminal, you're not a corpse, you're something worse, a known variable, a proven anomaly. You've returned from where people aren't supposed to return. At your door, you pause. There's no sign of forced entry, but something feels off. You step inside and notice the change immediately. Your books are gone. Not all, just the good ones. The rare ones, the ones you hid under floorboards or inside kitchen jars. Someone's been here. Not to destroy, but to remove. You doubt you'll see them again. Your landlord appears the next morning. He doesn't knock, just walks in and announces a necessary increase in your rent. Nothing personal, he says. Just keeping up with the times. You don't argue. You just nod. He keeps his eyes on your shoulders, never your face. Later you visit the coffee house where you used to perform, back before everything. The owner greets you with a forced smile that slides off his face as quickly as it arrived. He tells you that business is slower these days. The regulars don't want trouble. They prefer music now, nothing political, nothing strange. You order tea and drink it alone. No one joins you. Your friends don't visit. Some send awkward, vague messages about health or travel or family obligations. Most say nothing. You run into one of them on the street, a fellow interpreter you once studied with. You smile. He frowns, hesitates, then says he has to be somewhere, and disappears into a crowd that wasn't there a moment before. You find a letter wedged under your door one evening. No name, no signature, just a note written in unfamiliar script. They're still watching. Be quiet. You burn it in the brazier, not because you believe it, but because you can't risk believing it's false. Your cat is gone. You ask around quietly. No one's seen her. You leave out scraps of fish. Nothing. You check the alleys. Nothing. She's either dead, or more likely, taken in by someone who isn't marked. You try not to take it personally. Even animals know when to jump ship. The ban is never stated outright, but you learn its shape quickly. You're not to teach, not to write, not to speak in public about anything with more weight than the weather. Your ink pots disappear. When you go to the market to buy more, the seller tells you they've been instructed not to sell to certain individuals. You ask what that means. He shrugs, says nothing. You keep a hidden pencil stub in the back corner of your cupboard. You stare at it some nights, wondering if it's still possible to forget how to use one. Eventually, you stop trying to interpret dreams. No one asks you to. You still have them, of course. Vivid, sometimes terrifying, sometimes slow and sad. You wake from one in which your mouth is filled with sand and you're trying to speak, but the grains pour out faster than you can form words. You take it as a sign and don't bother to analyse it. Instead, you learn to garden. It starts small, a few clay pots with mint and parsley. Then a vine, a fig sapling, a row of lentils in a window box. You kneel in the dirt with your hands, your actual hands, not your mind, and coax green things to live. It doesn't make sense exactly, but it works. The neighbours don't ask questions. They nod politely now, but only from a distance. You're the man who grows things quietly. That's all. You become someone else, not forgiven, not redeemed, just reshaped. You stop visiting the coffee house, you stop walking the long way past the madrasa, you avoid the market on Fridays, you speak little, you write nothing, you wait for the silence to become permanent. And in its own slow way, it does. You are no longer dangerous, you are just a gardener with a limp. Eventually your name fades, not all at once, not in some grand purge of records or declarations of innocence. It just happens the way rot spreads, slowly, invisibly, then all at once. The clerk who recorded your case file retires. His replacement has a neater hand and less curiosity. Your name gets miscopied, then misspelled, then misfiled. The paper yellows, the ink bleeds. At some point, it's moved from the active concerns pile to the resolved and unimportant shelf, which no one dusts. The palace has other things to worry about now. A satirical poem makes its rounds. Something about a pigeon that sounds suspiciously like the Grand Vizier. That becomes the new scandal. Everyone debates whether the metaphor is intentional and whether pigeons are naturally traitorous or just misunderstood. Someone gets arrested. The cycle begins again. You are not part of it. The coffee houses, once so eager to whisper your name, have shifted their focus. A merchant's son has vanished under suspicious circumstances. There's talk of a cursed amulet found in a madrasa well. The tea sellers have a theory involving Venetians, and a beggar insists it's the jinn again. No one mentions you. You've become old gossip, faded ink, the footnote to a paragraph that no longer gets read. You walk through the market now without drawing stares. A few people still recognise you, older ones mostly. The baker who once asked you to bless his sick daughter nods politely when your paths cross, but he doesn't stop to chat. His daughter survived. That's all that matters. Memory is selective when survival is the priority. One day, you hear your name spoken at the edge of a crowd. You're not being summoned, just mentioned. Casually, like a story half remembered, a young man asks about you, your case, your trial, the spectacle in the square. The older man beside him frowns, squints, and then shrugs. Didn't they die? You're standing just a few feet away. You don't correct him. You just finish your shopping and leave quietly, the way you came. At home, your garden continues to grow. The mint has overrun the corner planter, and the fig tree is stubbornly producing fruit too early. You spend your mornings tending to the soil, and your evenings drinking tea in the doorway. Sometimes you read old stories, ones with endings that feel too clean. You skip those parts. You've learned better. Your hands have changed. They're rougher now, more confident with tools than pens. You haven't written anything in over a year. Sometimes you dream in ink, long looping calligraphy that spells out things no one wants to hear. but you wake up to dirt under your nails instead of a quill in your hand. That's enough. A neighbour's child starts visiting. He watches you plant lentils and asks questions you don't answer. One day he brings you a broken slate tablet and asks if it can be fixed. You don't know why he trusts you with it. Maybe because you're quiet, maybe because everyone else is too busy. You patch it with wax and linen and hand it back. He smiles like you've saved a life. You say nothing. Sometimes you visit the mosque courtyard and sit at the edge where no one pays attention. You listen to the sermons, not for meaning, just for rhythm. The same warnings, the same reassurances. Stay pure, avoid corruption. God sees all. The faces in the crowd have changed, but the tone has not. You wonder how many others are listening, while quietly trying not to be seen. The coffee house you used to visit has a new owner. The walls have been repainted, and the poetry nights have stopped. Now it's all music and card games and storytelling. Laughter echoes more easily now. You sit near the back when you go, if you go. One night, a young man recites a verse about fire and forgetting. You can tell it's plagiarized. You don't say anything. He's good at delivery. Across the city, someone else is being accused. You don't know who, you don't ask. But you see the signs. The uptick in whispers. The mosque sermon shifts slightly in tone. New pamphlets circulate. Someone is suddenly absent from a usual stall. You recognize the shape of fear as easily as a shadow at sunset. You should feel relief that it isn't you. You don't. You just feel practiced. Sometimes you speak to no one for days. It doesn't feel strange. You still listen. To the wind, to the birds, to the pots shifting in the night air. The city has a rhythm you've learned to move around, not with. You're not part of its heart anymore. You're a scar on its skin, barely visible, mostly healed, occasionally sore when the weather turns. You wonder what they did with your confession, whether it's tucked away in a folder under some clerk's teacup, whether someone ever read it again, whether they believed it, whether belief even mattered. One night, the child with the slate brings you a gift, a piece of chalk wrapped in cloth. You nod and accept it. Later, you use it to draw a line on a clay pot. Nothing important, just a mark to track the sun. But your hand lingers a little too long after. The gesture is familiar. It scares you more than it should. You don't draw again for a while. One day, someone new moves into your building. A weaver, soft-spoken, always humming. She offers you apricots from her garden. You take them and smile. She doesn't know who you are. She wasn't here when it happened. To her, you're just the quiet neighbour, with dirt under his nails, and a garden that never seems to die. And for the first time in a long while, that feels almost like a life. That brings us to the end of tonight's Quiet Collapse. Not a tale of redemption, but of caution, silence, and the kind of mercy that leaves no fingerprints. If you're somehow still awake, thank you for surviving Ottoman justice with me. Barely. If you'd like early access to more slow unravellings and mildly cursed episodes from history's forgotten corners, plus perks like ad-free audio, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment letting me know when you would have given up dream interpretation for a nice, normal job herding goats. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find the show. Sleep well.